We have a slight delay. We're just waiting for our sound person to come up. Was that better back there?
A little bit.
Okay, then I'm using it.
Now I've lost my screen
Do
too.
you want me to restart it again?
He's coming up.
Okay.
Slight issue.
So up down to that reception on the wall. So.
Okay. Tested these today. It worked. Great.
You know what? We'll speak loudly.
Yeah, come on.
Test, test.
Think of that we missed. Like, is there?
There's something I can try from downstairs. Try that and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll. Okay. Okay, we're going to call this council meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. and we will try to talk loud until the sound comes back on. Need a motion for adoption of the minutes, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on Tuesday, October 9th, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Dreger. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have no delegations this evening, so we'll move into public hearing. This is for road closure bylaw 18-8676. And this is Councillor Buds, please.
Did you motion, or did you move to open the public hearing, Your Worship?
Sorry. I need a motion to open the public hearing for bylaw 18-8676.
I'll move to open.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Just looking to see if there's anyone here to speak to the motion. You want me to do that?
Yeah. Is there anyone here to speak to the motion? Any final call? Anyone here to speak to the road closure bylaw 18-8676? Okay.
I'd like to move to close the public hearing for road closure bylaw 18-8676.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. All those in favor? And that's carried.
So this item for council's review is not new. We've been dealing with this for quite some time, and it's taken several approvals and through several departments. So tonight, I'll be moving that we read this bylaw for the second and third time, so there's no changes associated with it. We did give first reading back in September the 10th. So it is the recommendation of the committee, and I so move that bylaw 18-8676 being a bylaw to close and sell all that portion of public lane in plan number 15 PLTO MWDIV in RL 58 Parish of Portage la Prairie, shown as parcels A and B on the attached plan of road closing to 6408673 Manitoba Incorporated and Portage Automotive Incorporated be given a second reading.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that bylaw 18-8676 be given third reading, finally passed, signed, and sealed, and forwarded to the Minister of Municipal Relations for approval.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll move into committees. Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Your committee has nothing new to report for this meeting, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. City Planning and Economic Development Committee. Councillor Dreger, please.
This committee also has nothing to report this evening at this time.
Thank you. Community Services Committee. Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Worship. Community Service Committee has nothing on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. And Councillor Wall, Waterworks Committee, please.
The Waterworks Committee has nothing this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening we do have addition of name and signage to Howie Avenue Volunteer Way. As we discussed last council meeting in committee, council did receive the request from Portage MCC Community Assistance Center, Inc. to consider adding a secondary street name to Howie Avenue, which runs behind the buildings on 3rd Street Southeast to Royal Road. They provided the suggestions of MCC Volunteer Way or Volunteer Way to honor over 1,000 local volunteers that have served the community by volunteering at MCC Thrift Shop over the years. The request noted that on November 2018 marks their 35th year since Portage MCC Thrift Shop began operation, and it has since grown to become the 3rd largest privately operated charitable thrift shop in Manitoba. They do feel that it would be a special way to recognize the service of their volunteers, and similar signage, or secondary signage, excuse me, does not legally change the name of the street. We have done so in other areas of the city, including Patriots Way on 2nd Street Northeast. So it is the recommendation to the Council of City of Portage la Prairie approve the installation of secondary signage on Howie Avenue and authorize administration to purchase and install signage for Volunteer Way signs. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Draycott and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Sure. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that's everything for transportation this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. We have no deferred business. We have no old business. However, we do have some new business. The RCMP occupancy agreement, and this is Public Safety. Councillor Espy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The issue is entering into a new lease agreement with the RCMP for the provision of office space for non-city RCMP members and staff. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police is housed at 340 Lauren Avenue East in Portage la Prairie. This building is owned and maintained by the City of Portage la Prairie. The lease provides that the RCMP pay a pro rata share of all police building operational and maintenance, as well as capital costs based on the number of non-city to city RCMP members and support staff ratio. Schedule B from the proposed agreement detailing the cost calculations is attached. Operating and maintenance costs may apply to site maintenance, snow removal expenses, janitorial expenses, HVAC, non-capital repairs, and other costs agreed to by both parties. The current agreement for the occupancy commenced on April 1st, 2013 and expired on March 31st, 2018 and is in overholding until October 31st, 2018. The RCMP requests that the agreement be renewed from November 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2023. At the time of commencement of this agreement on April 1st, 2013, the City of Portage la Prairie granted the RCMP for 2 additional periods of 5 years each, upon all the same terms and conditions stated therein, including the occupancy fee. It is the administrative recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie authorize the Mayor and Manager of Administration to sign this agreement between the RCMP and the City of Portage la Prairie for occupancy of the police building by non-city police staff for a term of 4 years and 5 months commencing on November 1st, 2018 and terminating March 31st, 2023, and further, the occupancy shall be in accordance with terms and conditions outlined in Schedule B attached hereto. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. The next new item of new business is the 2018 tax sale. This is Councillor Buds. This is Finance.
Thank you. So, as council knows, that the annual tax sale was held on September the 10th, or was scheduled to be held on September the 10th, sorry. Prior to this time, though, all properties were redeemed from the sale proceeding, with one property being withdrawn from the sale at the request of the city. So, just what I'm saying there is the sale was scheduled to be held. The terms of those properties involved in that were withdrawn, and one of those requests came from the city itself. The property that the city withdrew is adjacent to the southeast section of the Rotary Republic Park and currently is not, nor can be accessible without entering the park property. So it's essentially landlocked. As a result, the city intends to purchase this property for its own land inventory, and to that end has rescheduled the tax sale to November 5th of this year, 2018 at 9:30 a.m. And as we need to follow the Municipal Act, Council is required to pass a motion to formally adjourn the auction and to allow for rescheduling of the tax sale. So it is a recommendation of the committee, and I so move, whereas pursuant to Section 369(1)(c) of the Municipal Act, a municipality may adjourn the action of all properties offered for sale, and it be resolved that the City of Portage la Prairie adjourn the tax sale scheduled for September 10th, 2018 to November 5th, 2018, and be it further resolved that pursuant to Section 3692, a notice of the adjournment be posted in the municipal office.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. The next new item of business is subdivision. This is City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Dreger, please.
Thank you. The issue here is to consider an application to subdivide 2.1 acres from an existing 5.52 acres. The applicant proposes the subdivision for residential purposes, and the proposed lot will be serviced by a septic field, holding tank, and piped water. Access is to be provided from McClenahan Drive, and the residual lot contains a dwelling that is serviced by a septic field and piped water. It is also accessed from McClenahan Drive. Pardon me. The proposed parcels comply with the requirements of the development plan and of this zone. There's several comments that came in, one from Manitoba Infrastructure. They had no concerns. Bell MTS, an easement agreement is required. For Manitoba Hydro, an easement agreement is required. And Portage la Prairie Planning District recommends approval. Land titles, a plan is required. Community and Regional Planning recommends approval of the subdivision application. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the subdivision of 2.1 acre parcel, Lot 3, from the existing 5.52 acres, Lot 2, of Part River Lot 102, Parish of Portage la Prairie, as shown on the attached survey sketch, subject to utility easement agreements being arranged. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And Councillor Dreger, the next new item of new business is also subdivision, and yours?
Yes, it is. It is a consideration to be given to an application to consolidate 16 bare land condominium units into 8 single-family dwelling lots. The applicant proposes to convert the existing 16 bare land condominium units and develop 8 single-family lots instead. All lots will be serviced by municipal sewer and piped water and accessed from a municipal road. Single-family dwellings in this area are a conditional use, and a variance order will be necessary to varying the minimum site width requirements. A council could decide to reduce the number of lots from 8 to 7 to ensure compliance with the minimum lot width. There are 16 pairs of water and sewer lines, therefore 8 pairs of lines will have to be abandoned at the main line connections if 8 single-family lots are created. We have a comment from Bell MTS that an easement agreement is required from the planning district, that they recommend approval, and land titles, a plan is required. Community and Regional Planning recommends approval of the subdivision application subject to the above-mentioned conditional use permit and variance orders. It is the recommendation of this committee that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conversion of lots 1 to 16, Condominium Plan 55863, PLTO into 8 single-family dwellings, conditional upon the applicants obtaining a condominium use permit and variance orders for lots 2 through 7, and a utility easement agreement with Bell MTS. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Final item of new business is street naming, and this is city planning and economic development again.
Yes, this is for the Southeast Development Phase 1. A road has gone in there, and the Municipal Act gives the city authority to name roads and post the names on public or private property. As well, Policy CL-AT provides for a formal process for selecting names for new streets, roads, and structures. The Southeast Development Phase 1 Subdivision, Provincial Subdivision File 4550-18-76 93 resulted in the creation of a public road as shown on the attached plan of subdivision sketch created by Derek Arthur of the City of Brandon, Manitoba Land Surveyor. This public road is an extension of Dufferin Avenue East and would not fall under Policy CL-AT to receive a new and different road name. Therefore, this committee recommends that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie confirm the street name of Dufferin Avenue East for the extension of Dufferin Avenue East, east of 9th Street Southeast, as shown on the plan of the subdivision. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So we will adjourn council at 6:19 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. We'll call committee to order at 6:19 p.m. First up is Finance, Legislative and Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. Your committee has nothing to report for this session of committee.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Councillor Dreger, for the last time, City Planning and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have this evening the report from the Planning District, just outlining the permits that have been purchased in the month of September and also the year-to-date for 2018 and how they compare to 2017. And as has been the case throughout this whole year, we're seeing a very good news story here with all the construction that's going on in the city and the RM combined. And the rates, the totals, I believe, are shown at the bottom of the combined. Is that the combined one up there? No. Okay, the combined one. You'll see that in September, 34 permits were sold for a value of $12,751,557. And for the year to date, that's 263 permits. Compared to last year to date was 286. But the value of those permits is almost double for this year, so that's very good news. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that? If not, we'll move into the second item. There is the third quarter report for this year from PRED, and I've asked Mr. Vern May to speak to that.
In short, it's been a very stellar third quarter with deals negotiated that will result in more than $44 million in new development. So we're very excited about that. And the third quarter looks good, but the fourth quarter is going to look even better. So stay tuned for that.
Well, thank you for that very brief report. And as the mayor mentioned, this is my last committee meeting, my last council meeting, and I just want to publicly say that it has been a pleasure to serve the city of Portage la Prairie these last 8 years, and I do wish all the candidates best of luck on Wednesday, and it'll be just exciting to see who's around this table come next council meeting. And that's all I have.
And that concludes your reports. Thank you, Councillor Dreger. Councillor Fraze.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a couple of items under community services. First, I'd like to just introduce, although she's not here, our new youth councillor. Very pleased to make this announcement. We've, since the last election, had 3 different youth councillors. This is our 4th one. And I'd like to welcome formally to our council as a youth councillor, Arisha Agarwal. Also, second item would be an evaluation of the Communities in Bloom program. It's for your information only, but I believe I saw James Kostachuk here. Would you like to speak to that, James?
Certainly.
Absolutely.
All right. I think I have a PowerPoint I forwarded, if someone put that up on the screen. And if you don't mind, if you could pass these around and give each councillor and the mayor one of the stoplights. This is the report. Do we have my PowerPoint? Or it's coming up? Okay. While we're waiting, we can show this is this is the official paperwork that came in.
It's the attachment.
Your evaluation.
Well, while we're waiting, I have some thank yous to do for this year. It was it's a fairly big operation. Basically, we have judges that come from outside the city, and we take them around Portage to show them the areas that they will score us on. And this year I had this, well, every year we've had excellent support this year from Mayor Ferris. We also had excellent support from Operations and Brian Taylor, PCRC, Victoria, Alejandra, and Vienna. Also indispensable in getting the tour going. Since we've started, we've had some changes in Portage la Prairie that have been much to our benefit. Probably the most notable one was the orchard that went in along Fisher. But based on the recommendations of the committee, we've also done, Heritage Committee applied for and received a grant to do a green space inventory that will give our town a snapshot of what it looked like before the emerald ash borer arrived. We also, a small thing, but we color coordinated the flowers this year to coincide with the anniversary of suffragettes. And there are a few other little projects that we're working on. Most notably would be the signage that went in along Fisher was a recommendation. And the other recommendation was that we would do a tour that people could have, like a walking tour. We currently have a walking tour, but it's very old, so we're looking at digitizing it. Any luck on finding it?
It's not the attachment that's on there?
No, it was a PowerPoint I put together. If you can't find it, I have a backup online, but I could also wing it if I have to.
I have a PowerPoint here.
Okay.
I just didn't make it to the agenda, but I have to get it. If I email it to you, can you pull it up?
While we're waiting, perhaps, are there any questions before I get started about the program? Yes?
I'm just curious, what was the color scheme?
The color scheme, now I'll have to get this right, I think it was white, purple, and violet, and
Green.
yes, green. And those are the colors of the original suffragette movement. And of course, this was the centenary of women getting the federal vote. So that was kind of a a small recommendation they made. Other things we did, like the Communities in Bloom program, the signage program that you see up around town, and homes getting awards. That was another recommendation from the committee that we implemented. And I have a few today to just talk about some of the things we need to do. I mean, one of the good news items, of course, is that we've moved up a bloom. We're now a 4 bloom. Of course, if you want to know what a 5 bloom community looks like, that's Brandon. Brandon has a pretty impressive record of dealing really well with the Communities in Bloom program. But I'm just going to walk you through this. It won't take very long. So, there we go. So Communities in Bloom 2018. Let me move the slide. So what are they looking for? This is the criteria. Clean communities, green, sustainable, heritage aware, and unique. So when we plan our tour, and it is much like a military operation, I drive through it several times and I pick out the locations we're going to go so that we can have discussions with the judges. We also have to have people in the vehicle who are able to answer the questions that the judges are going to have. So this is the breakdown of what goes on in Communities in Bloom. So this is what we scored this year. So tidiness 80%, environment 73, heritage 73, urban forestry 71, and floral displays. And I have to say, indispensable to the tour this year is Dave Green very graciously agreed to spend a morning with me, and he walked me through Island Park. And he has a very deep and profound knowledge of the park, and certainly a lot of his spirit went into this year's tour and how we did it. Just to give you a comparison, we're a 4 bloom community, so when you're traveling throughout Manitoba, this kind of shows you where I picked communities that you could kind of look at and then kind of see what's a 5 and what's a 4. And I wanted to call this the good, the bad, the ugly because I love Westerns. But really there isn't any ugly in Portage la Prairie. But there is some crunchy and there is some smooth, and we're going to look at both. So this comes down to what can the tour guides do and what can the community do. So if you flip to the next slide. The environmental to-do list. These are recommendations from the Communities in Bloom's judges, and they have a strong background in a lot of these things. So for instance, the lead judge this year spent most of his career with the City of Winnipeg doing parks management. So he had a recommendation that for environmental to-do list that we would have more, try to solicit more corporate input in terms of what we're doing with environmental stewardship. Next slide. Oh yeah, the heritage. Review the natural heritage policies and bylaws, and we will do that. Ensure enforcement of those bylaws and look at natural heritage promotion. So that was one of the things we did with obtaining that grant to do a heritage green space inventory. I'll also point out that the picture in the background is a bicycle race in Portage la Prairie in 1891 on Island Park. So, yeah. Oh yeah, urban forestry. This was interesting. When Dave Green took me through the park, one of the things that amazed me is the history of each of the trees. I've only ever looked at built history, so it was interesting for me to talk trees. So one of the things they talked about is to enhance the interpretive elements of those trees. So they used to have name tags on them, but for various reasons they disappeared. So they said that the judges said we could look at maybe redoing those name tags. And then the other concern they had is that some of the trees were missing their tree guards when we went through the young ones. Many did, but there were a few that didn't. So those were 2 recommendations for urban forestry. Landscape to-do list, they were kind of looking for a tall grass ecosystem. There was a plan to do one at Fort Lorraine some time ago. I don't know where that project is at presently. And then they talked about wetland restoration on the Crescent. Of course, that's going to be coming up. But one of the things I've often said is that one of the easiest things you could do to change perception, I think, of Crescent Lake would be just to rename it Crescent Marsh. And then it would be put it in an appropriate context, because the ecosystem that exists there is a marsh, and it would be most appropriate, I think, to maintain it as a marsh ecosystem. Floral display to-do lists. So if you've ever been to Brandon City Hall, of course you have your own greenhouse. Not to brag, but Portage had a greenhouse before Brandon did. But you know, through the years it disappeared. But expand Garden of the Week to other initiatives so that we could acknowledge people who do great things in their yards. Expand community gardening. Use the Thriller, Filler, Spiller model on Saskatchewan Avenue. You had no idea what that is. That's when you have a tall plant in the you know, on the median we have those planters. So you would have a tall plant. that sticks right up high, and then some little ones around it, and then stuff that goes over the edge. So they said they want to see thriller, filler, and spiller. And they also want to try, they said we could try perennial garden beds on the Crescent Path. They acknowledge that it's, you know, those might be damaged or there could be issues, but they said they wouldn't mind seeing some test beds on the Crescent. So what are we doing right? Now, this gets me down to the stoplight. On the stoplight, you'll see a green, a yellow, and a red. The green is for things that we're doing well or that you'd like to put the gas on and start doing. The yellow are things that you see that you have questions about. The reds are things that you want to stop doing as a council or as a city. And the bottom part is for an aha moment. That's something that you noticed on here and you go, yeah, I'd like to do that, or that's something I'd like to remember. And then you can tuck it in your binder. And when you're doing your budget deliberations, you can refer right to it and see if it fits into your planning. So, successes. Graffiti control. These are quotes directly from the committee. It says it impresses as a tidy and well-maintained city. The graffiti mediation that we used behind the library in Portage la Prairie has worked. That was one of the worst areas of the city, no longer any problem. The mural on what was formerly the bingo hall across from the Gillespie Center, also no problem. So that is working very well. And you'll notice that our overpass in the summer, as soon as they're tagged, it's dealt with. And as we know, that program works. So that's a resounding success for our community. That's our next one. Oh. The Greasy Chain received a special mention award this year. Of course, the Greasy Chain will provide a bicycle for anyone who needs it. The only caveat is that the person who wants a bicycle has to come and build it themselves. But that's pretty special, and it's run by volunteers, and it's in a good location in the city, centrally located. They were very impressed. The judges were very impressed with the Greasy Chain. Rotary Republic Park, they called, is amazing. We actually took our shoes off and we walked through it in our bare feet. It is a remarkable achievement. That everything from the way that the trees were planted, the condition of the fields, and the way that it's dealt with in an environmentally responsible manner. They were highly impressed with Rotary Republic Park. They felt it was one of, in fact, he'd said it was the best, I guess, turf that he had ever witnessed, and that's coming from a City of Winnipeg Parks manager. Cultural heritage policies. He found our community to be fascinating. We've done a lot of good strides in terms of protecting built heritage, and they were very impressed with, well, just every, you know, we're one of the oldest cities in Western Canada. So, you know, just having the home of Arthur Meehan here, that's, you know, and being well preserved, those are all important achievements in terms of heritage. And also called our urban forest. Again, their quote, impressive. We took them around Island Park. They thought it was phenomenal to have such a care for an urban forest. Island Park recommendations. Now, here's the thing. When I take people on the tour, I'm an ambassador, and so I have to make the calls about where we're going to go. So this is me. This isn't the judges or anything else. This is where I don't focus on. So I think that the day of the deer pen might be done. We had a bear pit historically. We decided to move away from putting bears in a pit. We had the bird cage that became problematic. I think it's okay to let the deer go, and as I understand it, the buck has passed on, so it is a problem that should resolve itself for council with very little effort. Clean up the duck pond. I talked at length with Dave Green about the duck pond. It looks to me, or it sounds to me like the solution to the duck pond won't be overly onerous from a financial perspective, so that would be something that council could look at. I think mostly it involves improving the flow of water from one side of the crescent to the other. And last but not least, and that I touched on that before, and that was the better signage, especially around the trees. So, now to you, any questions? All right. Oh, yes.
Comment. Thank you for the synopsis of it. I mean, the report itself is a good report, but we don't get that feel from a representative in our city. So thank you for bringing the perspective here and the perspective of the people that were involved in it. And there is some takeaways here for us to consider. So I appreciate the synopsis of the communities in bloom, because we just kind of get stuck sometimes on the number of blooms. and where we stack up and not what we necessarily can consider for improvement. So thank you for that.
And it was a lot of fun doing it, and I've learned a lot about our city. And just one of the other things you may not be aware of, I did not realize how many community gardens we had. And that's really an impressive thing. We stopped at the one on the north end near MDC, and it's huge. And the city stepped up because the people who had put it in didn't have water, so the city had been taking care of some of the water issues they did. And that's kind of reacting on the fly to needs that are taking place in the community. So that to me was a real amazing thing to see. I didn't even know that they existed. And they're going up all over the place. So, yeah.
Councillor Draycott.
Thank you. If I could just make a comment, I'd like to thank you for your hard work that you've done for this process and for PCRC and the Communities in Bloom committee that's been established. I've been lucky enough to partake in the evening's event with the judges and the tour guides, and it's really great to actually sit around and break bread with them and hear what's the best parts of our community that we sometimes don't see or we take for granted. So I really appreciate the work that goes into that every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions from council? Well, Mr. Kostyuk, I just want to thank you again this year for the invitation to come along, and again I discovered some new things about our great city, and thank you so much for doing all this and reporting to council tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to go home and do some marking. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you.
Now on the agenda, if anybody wants to look at it. It is there.
Thanks again, Mr. Kostyuk.
Thank you.
Another item on the agenda for Community Service Committee is third quarter reports for PCRC, the Parks Committee, the Heritage Committee, and the Public Art Committee. They're available for you to have a look at. In particular, the PCRC report is informative, it's colorful. Victoria Espy is here. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure, thank you. So a large part of our summer was the Communities in Bloom program, which I think James captured really well. We recently launched a campaign called Got Citizenship, Go Vote for the upcoming election. We've held information sessions at the Learning and Literacy Center for newcomers to explain the differences between the municipal, provincial, and federal elections and why it's important to be involved in your municipal election period. We did talk about the graffiti removal team as a part of the Communities in Bloom program, but this year the graffiti removal team covered up 57 tags, which included the Tupper Street Bridge, which is only counted as one instance, and there's it's a huge job. So they did an excellent job this year. I think that's the most we've ever done. I chaired the Community Mobilization Committee, which is going really well, and there will be a presentation given to council in the coming months on how that is going as well. And then we had the Dirt Dash, was another huge event, and we did quite well there. We had 200 participants, so that was really exciting.
Thank you very much, Victoria. It's just also interesting. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick question with regards to the hub model that's working, and I know that PCRC plays an instrumental role in that, but still not seeing the support from health. And is there any commentary that you can provide council on that with regards to getting those people to the table?
Yeah, so we've had a few conversations with different representatives from Southern Health, including their CEO, Jane Curtis. There has not been support from them this far. It is a little bit frustrating because mental health is our highest risk factor that we're seeing at the table. It is number one, addictions being number two, and basic needs. So that Southern Health would kind of cover all of those. So we're hoping to get them to the table again to have another conversation around it. we just received word that we are getting a representative from the Department of Families who's going to sit at the table, so that will cover programs like EIA and community living disability services, so that is a huge win for us too. But not at this time, and it's we're making out okay, but we would be a lot stronger with their support, definitely.
Have they mentioned that it's just not within their mandate? Is it financial? Is it any?
Do you want to speak to this?
Sure. I've met with officials from Southern Health, and it's really a resource issue in their mind. It's a pretty significant commitment, and I think the hub has a really good track record so far. So we're hoping they see that track record and see what they could gain by being a partner around that table. But we continue that dialogue with their staff, and we keep them aware of how we're progressing.
Thank you.
We track statistics, like non-identifying statistics, but having those and seeing it's a glaringly obvious where we could have used their support. So I'm hoping that by tracking all the data we have, we'll have a strong argument to get them there.
Perfect. Thank you.
If I could just add to that, Councillor Budds, CMHA, a local nonprofit, is filling in, at least in part, the role that RHA might play.
Yeah, they've been an invaluable resource to the team.
Which, thank you for your report, which brings me to just wrap up this third quarter report thing and pull out from the various reports the connections that exist. It's interesting to see how in a community the size of Portage, all these various groups pull together. And a perfect example would be how PCRC and the Parks Committee work together to make sure we have good green space. Also interesting to see how public art might play in with the splash pad artistic part of it. Heritage Committee is looking at getting together with First Nations groups to see if there's something we could do to acknowledge some of their history with either street names or something. So it's really fascinating to see how all of these are interconnected, which is what you like to see in a community. And that would conclude my report.
Thank you, Councillor Freeze. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Waterworks Committee has nothing to report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Draycott, Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next council meeting, we will be discussing the request for a road closure for the Parade of Lights. And so the report is there, but I think that we can probably wait till next council meeting to go through and make any recommendations and have some solid discussion on that, so the people voting on it are the people that are doing the talking. So the report is there, coming up for next council meeting. And that's everything for transportation this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Councillor Espy, the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have the third quarter reports attached for information. So information on statistics for RCMP and bylaw enforcement. And if there are no questions, there's a question.
Councillor Budds.
Just a quick one, and maybe it'll be deferred to Mr. Carpenter, but I saw a very significant increase in the complaints issued without formal notice for the same time period from 2017 to 2018, from 49 to 112. And so I was just wondering if there is that something that we're just getting people more actively involved in understanding a complaint process? Is that more activity on behalf of bylaw? Is there some reasoning behind the numbers?
And I will happily defer that to Chief Carpenter for a response.
Okay.
We're in the bylaw report?
Yep.
Or CMP?
Yeah, I'm sorry, bylaw report.
And that was in reference to complaints?
Under the Appendix D, bylaw enforcement report, there's 3 separate time periods. Well, there's the same time period for several different years, so it's been progressing, but over the last year it was a marked increase in the same time period.
Right, so I think basically it's in reference to they have been pretty proactive with yards, as you may or may not be aware. And along with that is just that neighbors, residents are being more active, I guess, in complaining about it. That I think basically hits that, or the reason why the number has increased quite a bit.
Okay.
Is the main reason anyway, that I'm aware.
And Your Worship, if there are no further questions, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Espy. So that finishes committee, other than we have question periods. So for folks in the gallery, we'd welcome you to come up to the podium and ask council a question. We will endeavor to answer that for you. Good evening, Mr. Knott.
Good evening, Mayor Ferris. For the last, no, not the last time. Quick question. There's several I've got, but they'll be very quick. I looked at the quarterly report of the Heritage Committee, and the recommendations were made to revise the relevant bylaws. Do we know, can we see those recommendations?
They're being worked on right now, I'm told.
In other words, no.
No, they're not ready yet, no. Estimated time? Hard to say, eh? Evening, Ms. Anderson.
Good evening. I'll try to speak loud because I know I don't have a voice that carries, just like some of you, if I may mention, some carry better than others. My question relates to accessibility. I asked this question to all the candidates at the Speed Date Your Candidate meeting. And by the way, I commend PCRC. That was an excellent forum. And I got varying answers from everybody as to why council refuses to move council meetings from this chamber, which is on the second floor, that many people can't climb the stairs, to an accessible location. If, for example, you were to move this meeting to the Gillespie Centre for the next period while you worked out whatever permanent solution you're trying to do, my cost estimate is it would be between $12,000 and $14,000 a year. Given that there has been discussion that council can allocate $800,000 for roundabouts, a $7 million causeway, I find the aspect that we cannot spend $12,000 to $14,000 to make all council meetings accessible immediately a concern. So my question is, why is council still resisting moving the meetings?
Okay. So I don't know if people want to jump into this game, but I think everybody answered those questions at the forum. But if anybody, is there people in council want to answer? So I will take your recommendation, though. Recommendation to spend up to $12,000 to move council meetings out of here into another venue like Gillespie.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that will be taken to the new council, obviously, and probably considered during the budgetary process, which will start in November.
Okay, because at that meeting, at the Speed Date Your Candidate meeting, I received responses from various people on council that, one, it was too much money, which I disagree with. Number two, that it was too much work, which I disagree with. People with accessibility issues have to live with that daily. I really believe this is important, which is why I brought it forward again. And I'm glad to hear that what you are saying, if I'm interpreting, is that this will become a discussion at the budget deliberations.
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Ferris and councillors, in the first meeting you have in November, the organizational meeting, will you advertise, would you give a program for recruitment of civic members to your various committees? Will you come up with a program to describe what the responsibilities are, what you need? Would you advertise in the community for people to be considered for various committees to be appointed?
Mr. Knott, there's no changes planned between now and the organizational meeting. However, this issue too will be discussed by the new council in probably November or December.
I have a second question. It relates to council has given, or city administration has given notice to both the Herman Prior and the library that in 5 years' time their rents are going to increase dramatically. For example, with the Herman Prior, their rent will go from $1 a year to, based on square footage amounts, roughly $21,000 a year. So they've been given 5 years' notice. At the same time, as far as I can tell, in the last 8 years, council has not increased the grant amount for the Herman Prior. It stayed at $15,000 a year. Given that that is a community resource, that it's a city building, and the same, I can't recall exactly the amounts that the library rate is going to be increased. Why would council do that to two community resources that are very important, that is going to cause a financial stress for them?
Okay, thank you for your question. Mr. Pato?
Yep. I could respond to your answer, Ms. Anderson. In regards to the decision to increase rent on those facilities, I think increased rent is maybe not the right term. The rent is increasing, but that money is being diverted to a reserve to support those buildings. The city has taken on the maintenance of several buildings, and those costs of those buildings are aging, HVAC systems, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is to proactively have that money put aside so when things go down, we can repair that and we don't have to sit with buildings with problems with roofs, HVAC systems, et cetera. So the idea is council proactively increase that rent, put that aside directly into reserve. It's not going to general expenses to plan for the future.
But council has chosen to increase the rent of two community resources who run on tight budgets right now as it is. So for example, for the Herman Prior Center, that will cause stress for them to come up with that additional money. They've been really working hard right now to try to cover their costs. And again, council has not increased their grant amount over the last 8 or more years. So for a community resource on a city-owned building, I question why you would do that, and also for the library as well, because the library is a truly important resource in our community. And so these boards struggle with these budgets. Again, I hate to bring this up again, but you are about to say that you want to spend $7 million on a causeway.
Okay. So your question, Ms. Anderson, is why would we raise the rents?
Why would you
And
add
what do we
to
do
the
with
financial
money?
stress of those two groups?
Okay. Okay, thank you for your question.
But you're saying it's for a reserve fund, but there's no consideration, you're not willing to give consideration to revisiting that. You insist that you will go ahead and raise their rent in 5 years.
That's the plan, and there's been meetings with both boards, and there's been a number of plans made, yes?
Okay. Just as an addendum to that then, it seems disproportionate when, for example, you did a 10-year lease recently for the Cocoa Platts Community Center for $1. We're not talking the same space, dynamics, and costs. But again, I look at the whole of how the city allocates their budget. You're about to go into deliberations.
So your new question is the comparison between the Cocoa Platts Community Club and Herman Prior.
As a whole, the library, Herman Prior, Cocoa Platts, what you're spending on the bridge, can council look at this in budget deliberations? Again, revisit it.
Well,
the actual standardization of rents for the facilities that you have mentioned will not be up for consideration during budget process. So as Mr. Pito has outlined, a proactive stance by the city has been taken to deal with infrastructure costs. And so the burden might have been borne by some of those organizations prior to this stance, and where the city understands its responsibility on a city-owned property. And so it's a proactive stance to deal with that. So I understand what you're saying, Mrs. Anderson, in terms of the strain on budgets. However, there's some relief in the regards that there isn't the same responsibility for what was used to be potentially could be considered some of that organizational cost. So it is a change, there's no question, but it won't be up for budget deliberation discussions.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking of doing the next question like in sign language, if you can imagine with me. Right?
Mr. Knott, do you have a question for council?
Yes, it's in sign language.
Okay. I don't think,
okay.
I don't think any of us know what's being asked.
Well, you never played charades, dear me. I'm welcoming French people in who are coming up with peas, right? And they're processing peas and they're parceling it out and so on and picking in money. In our city, we have a program, and the manager knows what I'm talking about. We have a program in this city where, in order to translate any language here, Bhutanese, a language from Papua New Guinea, or the other official language of this town, we have a telephone that we ring up and get a translator on it and use a loudspeaker telephone. Okay. Is it the intention of this council to recommend to the next council that we proactively recruit people who can speak French?
Okay. I'll defer that question to Mr. Pato. And,
Okay, well, I'll first, you sort of stole my answer there, Mr. Knott, because we did talk about it already. So we subscribe to a Can Talk service, which can do simultaneous translation for people who speak a number of official languages from a number of countries. In regards to French language training for staff, that is not typically a requirement on the job descriptions, and I haven't been necessarily given that direction to change that. So with the new, perhaps I misunderstand the question, but if they're asking regarding, is that going to be a new priority of council or a new priority of administration to hire people who can speak French because of an possible increase of people who may require services in French? I'm not aware of that. That's not something that has been a directive of administration or council.
I'll just add to the clarification. So we've been doing community planning meetings with Simplot and Roquette since May or June of this year. We've had a number of meetings with them and their executives, some of their staff, and there's been no request for that. We are looking at the schools. We've got the school board looking at what capacity we have, especially for French immersion. And as far as the employees themselves, they all speak very good English, so that hasn't been an ask.
Thank you, Mayor Ferris. I'm not looking for French language training for the staff. I'm asking, would you recruit French language speakers so that when Roquette and its people get here, someone will be able to respond to them?
There's no plans. That's not being considered in the hiring process at this time. Any further questions from anybody in the gallery?
Last question, last comment. For those of you who are still here on Thursday, welcome back. For those who aren't, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Knott. Well, before we adjourn, as Mr. Knott alluded to, this will be the last time that we will meet as a council. First of all, I want to acknowledge the contributions that Councillor Dreger has made to our council and indeed our city. Liz served 2 terms on council from 2010 to the present. She served in many capacities, including board member of the Fort Loraine Museum, chair of the Portage and District Landfill Authority, chair of the Planning District, PRED board member, and for the past 4 years, she has chaired our City Planning and Economic Development Committee. During this time, Portage has seen unprecedented business investment. Liz was a determined debater when she felt passionate about an issue. So on behalf of the council and the citizens of Portage la Prairie, I want to thank you for your commitment and your dedicated service to our city. And I'd like to do a little informal presentation. This is from council. This is not from the city. And I know in your retirement you're going to be spending a lot of time with your grandkids outside, and I know what the winters get like. So on behalf of this council, we'd like to present this small token of our appreciation to you. And we hope that you would wear it and enjoy it.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you. Well done, Liz. Reminds me of 2 fellows I met at the Hospital Foundation the other night with toques on. But anyway, they're very comfortable. Finally, I want to thank the staff of the council for all your hard work over the past 4 years. Portage is indeed fortunate to have such a professional, dedicated group of staff who personify the term public servant. I thank you all for that. Last but not least, I want to thank my council for your hard work and your commitment to the citizens of Portage la Prairie. I'm proud to have served with all of you, and I'm even prouder to call all of you my friends. And this council meeting is adjourned at 7 p.m. sharp.